keeping the rook active. You know, maybe rook d1 here, rook fd1. He just takes. Knight e3 is interesting here too. I mean, it's a bit of an annoyance. I'm sure computer analysis would show something a little show a little improvement with knight e3. But anyway, knight to e5. All right, so Chad just takes the rook there, which is fine. You know, I think it's fine for. I mean, he's not gonna. It would be a big mistake to after here to move the rook off, because then obviously the black rook becomes more active, and active rooks is really important to the endgame. But one quick thing about knight and pawn endgames, or for that matter, commonly same colored bishop and pawn endgames. You know, typically the thing is the piece can sack for the last pawn, so that typically is one thing that makes it drawish. But specific to knight and pawn endgames, usually a knight and pawn endgame, you can tell if it's winning or drawish, if or at least who has winning chances, based on if a scenario. Imagine, for example, in this position, if you just removed the knights from the board, who would win? So you can tell who has the winning chances or who's going to win the knight and pawn endgame typically by visualizing the board with no knights and saying, you know, who's going to win that. And it's not always true. I mean, clearly there's tactical considerations, but that's a rule of thumb that's can be helpful in a pinch. So he plays f4, which is definitely a mistake. Clearly, it just loses the pawn there, which is his big advantage. You know, White has two main strengths. He has the extra pawn, and he has one of his pawns is an unopposed pass pawn on the e-file. And right now, it's you know, supported by another pawn. You know, White, the f pawn is pretty important if he can, you know, advance to threaten having connected pawns or whatever. And I don't know. This is a tactical oversight, and Chad's score sheet actually had listed a question mark, so obviously he knows it. I mean, you can't miss that it's an oversight. But you know, I think the most important thing about this is, well, first off, you can't drop the pawn, but secondly, the first thing to consider when scheming out this endgame, when you know, running through where you want your pieces to go or what your plan is in the endgame, your first consideration is probably going to be to activate the king. You know, what square is best for my knight? What side of the board do I want the king to go to? So I would think that, you know, king f1 would seem reasonable. Obviously, if king f2, then knight d3 check, and once again, he wins the b pawn. Well, anyway, f4 was played. So this is the pawn. For the one, so I hate to go back, but the one thing I was thinking of for the scheme, and maybe you can post your own ideas in the commentary, would you know, I would think that the you could probably wait a while to commit the king, but you definitely need to start moving it. I would start moving in the center, basically trying to advance the pass e pawn and then just playing off of uh, one of the sides to munch pawns essentially. Um, and the path now would be king f1, king f2, and then king e3. And then depending on what black does, either king f4 or king d4. Um, in these knight and pawn or like single piece and pawn endgames, a lot of it too, it's not as much scheming as it is with multiple piece endgames, but it's also calculation. Um, but in generally, regardless of what you're not going to calculate out 40 moves here. But in any plan, typically you're going to activate your king. So that's why I think king f1 intuitively should have been Chad's first consideration. So king f1 was king f2. Okay. I think that this endgame should probably be drawn most of the time. White still, I don't know if I would say has winning chances. I mean, he has the only pass pawn, but it shouldn't be too hard to convert the majority on the queen side. All right, well, black right here, white definitely has the easier plan, so to speak, in the sense that um, he's going to play something like e6, e7, and from um, deflect the king from his protection of the h and g pawns. White takes those pawns and advances as passers. Um, Black, on the other hand, can't just play passively. He needs to create a passer of his own, or at least start advancing his pawns in a method to prepare for the creation of that passer. Um, actually, he can just go ahead and start. Like, for example, black plays something like c5. If e6, then just b5, e7. It's going to have to play king over. And then, if take, I wouldn't even bother with, what maybe even actually g4 first or something. But right away he's going to have something like something pushing there, and actually I'm making it so that black is winning, but I still feel like it's a draw here. I think I think that I just didn't play very accurate moves for white. But the point is that black can't just sit passively and play something like king h7, king g7, and he can't let white start to advance comfortably with g4 and activate his plan quickly. So c5 I think is best. B5 is actually looks losing. After b5, you can just play b4. That's the reason I say that. And now you see if black's going to run out of tempos here. If he plays something like c5 right here, he loses. He loses to the second passer there, and he can't defend the CE and the threat of taking and pushing here. That would be insurmountable. So if he, held off his execution with a6, then just a simple a3, or even, even g4 seems reasonable. So So yeah, after b5, b4 just wins the game.